What's good, everybody? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Over Quota. Please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review if you haven't already. And like always, the J. David Group, which is my company, is sponsoring this podcast. We help founders and CEOs turn their startups into unicorns by introducing them to CROs and VPs of sales with track records of generating revenue, building teams, and scaling growth. This podcast is also now being sponsored by Allego. For all you sales leaders out there, have you ever absolutely nailed sales training or had a rep who killed a presentation that you wished you recorded to be seen later by new hires or other members of the team? Well, that's just one of the things that Allego can do. Not only does it allow you to record your best content for practice, collaboration, and feedback, but it gives you a way to organize all of your best content in one place so it is easily accessible to help improve sales performance for everyone. Email me, Webb, with 2 B's, at the J. David Group so I can personally take great care of you and introduce you to someone else who can take great care of you. Now, my guest today is Scott Sambucci. Scott is a startup coach, keynote speaker, podcaster, and best-selling author. He has spent 25 years building and selling enterprise technology products as an executive at 2 publicly traded companies and leading 3 Silicon Valley startups, each to their first millions in revenue. Scott earned an MBA in finance from Duke University and an MA in economics from the University of San Francisco. Today, as the founder and chief sales geek at SalesQualia, Scott and his team work with enterprise SaaS startups and tech companies all over the world and across several industries, including fintech, HR tech, ed tech, healthcare, manufacturing, construction, and artificial intelligence. And outside of work, Scott is an accomplished endurance athlete, including 3 Ironman triathlon finishes, an 11-mile swim across Lake Tahoe, and a 21-mile ocean swim across the Catalina Channel. He's also completed 4 100-mile and 2 200-mile ultra marathons. I'm getting tired just reading this. He lives in Davis, California with his wife and son, 2 cats, a dog, 6 chickens, and 3 goats. Scott, welcome to Over Quota, and when do you sleep?
At night. I usually get to bed by 9 o'clock and I'm up by 4. That's my rule. I tell my wife I want to start winding down at 8:30 so I can be asleep by 9 and up at 4. That's my ideal. I'm usually able to do that 3-4 days a week. The weekends, depending if I'm getting up early, I get up early on Saturdays to train. Sundays, I let myself sleep in till like 6. So
when you say get up early, is that get up early at 4 you're talking about, or get up even earlier at 4?
Usually at 4. Like on Saturdays, if I have a long trail run planned, it's usually up by 4. A couple of times I have to get up at 3:30 or 3:45, depending on where I have to go. I live in Davis, as you mentioned, which is pretty flat ground, not great training ground for running ultra marathons. So I usually have to drive out towards the Sierra Nevadas a little bit or somewhere else in order to get some hills and mountains in. So that's the early mornings, so I can get out to the trail early and back home before too late in the day, so I can still spend some time with the family and the chickens and the dog and the goat, and what seems like we might be adding 2 horses to the mix over the next couple of days.
Now, where does that come from? Where does that obviously love of animals and all that?
It's from my wife, really. I mean, she's like awesome, first of all, but she's always, since she was a kid, always read about animals, always wanted to be a veterinarian growing up, do stuff with animals. And then eventually she actually is a PhD from UC Davis in the agricultural resource economics department. And so she does a lot of work with farmers and different risk models and things like that. But these are all basically pandemic purchases. So we're actually laughing this morning. We got our chickens in September of last year, which we keep here at our house. And then we decided, we should get a dog. So we got a dog in October. And then she wanted some goats. We have a friend that owns a farm. So he said, well, I'll keep the goats here. So we bought some goats. And now we're looking pretty hard at getting a couple of horses that she's going to keep at a place where she goes horseback riding, take some lessons. So it's all from her. I just get to ride along and enjoy all the work that she does to put it in. And now we have all these different animals in her life.
And ride along might be literally soon, not just figuratively when you get those horses.
Exactly. Yeah. So fingers crossed that all work out the way we want. But so that's awesome. That's when I sleep, and that's what we do around here. So
I want to get into SalesQualia in a moment, but a couple of things, I guess, leading to that, which is, as I was reading that introduction there and just learning about you, and obviously including the ultra marathons and what your ultra, I'll say, endurance events, and listening to all that we were just talking about with the animals. You strike me as someone who is really disciplined and regimented, obviously, about not only right, yeah, that's an understatement, right? Not only with what you do, but how you do it. In other words, do you structure your time in a way that is consistent based on certain days and weeks, and for both personal and professional affairs? I'm just curious about how you actually go about doing that.
Yeah, I do. So like, and it kind of relates to the ultra marathon training that I do. I have this philosophy called no wasted miles, meaning like every mile I'm out there is a mile I'm not home. I'm not spending time with my family. I'm not, doing stuff around the house. I'm not spending time with clients. So I want to make sure I'm making the most out of every mile that I'm running. So every mile has a purpose. Every workout has a purpose. And so to make sure I'm getting the most out of those workouts, or in this case, the most out of what I want to do with my life, there's kind of like two basic things I do. Is one, for myself, I keep things pretty narrow. There's only a couple things that I focus on. I focus on my family, I focus on my business, and I focus on my running. I don't really have any other hobbies outside of that, so to speak. So that keeps it simple. So I don't have a lot of decisions to make. It's like I'm going to be doing one of those three things. And then as it relates to like how I structure my days and my weeks, my first principle is like what I call schedule everything. So even today, before you and I hopped on, when I looked at my day and at the beginning of the week ahead, I met with Amy, who is our head of operations, from 9 to 10. And then we're meeting here from 11 to 12. I had like a 1 hour window. And in that 1 hour window, I put in my calendar exercise. So that's on my work counter. So my team knows I'm unavailable. It's when I know I'm going to get it done. It puts a time limit on it. It's not the longest workout. I was out in my garage just doing some quick strength work, but now I'm done, I'm showered, and I'm back, I'm energized and ready for the rest of the day. So I do that with everything in terms of how I block out my days running the business. Mondays are, for example, what we call our content development day. So it's a day where I'm not really doing any meetings or anything. I'm just focused on building new content, whether those are books I'm writing or content for clients. Fridays are operations day. So lots of team meetings, one-on-ones, those kinds of things. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursdays are either coaching or growing the business. So yeah, I mean, I just find if I know what I'm up against every day, every week, and I know what that routine is, I don't have to do a lot of thinking. I can just go, oh, this is the thing I'm doing next. I focus on the now thing now and worry about the later stuff later.
Those days that you just outlined, were those intentional? In other words, how was Monday content day and other day operational day? Like what was the thought process there?
Yeah, so I take weekends are almost always off. I never do any work on the weekends. Occasionally, like on a Sunday afternoon, I might pop in and do an hour or two or something like that. But I was working a lot on the weekends during the first shutdown just to help clients and keep things going. But that just wears you down. Like I'm a big believer in taking a break. That that 1 day or 2 day break is gonna help you get a lot more flow in the week ahead, because you're going to be rested and ready. Your subconscious is working on stuff, even if you're not consciously sitting in front of a computer doing work. And so by the time Monday rolls around, I'm feeling fresh and I'm feeling renewed. And so the sense is like, if I can just wake up on Monday and not have to worry about a team meeting, or I have to worry about jumping on a sales call, or I have to work on some kind of marketing document, I can just open up my computer and not open email, not open anything else or Slack, and just start writing, or go drop my son off at camp and go to the coffee shop for a couple hours and just be creative. Then that allows me to just get into the flow without these other disruptions bombarding me that other people on the team can handle without me. So that's why I do Monday as the content day. I do Friday as the operations day, because it's just a good day to wrap up the week with the team. And okay, what have we accomplished? What's ahead? Make sure everybody's in line with what the expectations are from them, and plan for the next week. So that's why I kind of book in the weeks on Monday and Friday in those ways.
All right. One more curiosity question there, which is,
Sure.
which is, how do you stay disciplined enough so that that's only what you focus on the days that you, and reason, by the way, let me just preface all this by saying that one of the things that I've tried to do over the years is exactly that. And I feel like the busier that I get, the less I focus on that, and my structure gets broken a little bit. And the business is really busy right now, and I need to restructure the way that I work. And I always try to optimize for performance, ultimately, right? I try to optimize for performance and where I feel like I'm going to have the most energy and bring the most strength into the business and to my family and all that. So, but I also, with that, say, okay, well, okay, Monday's going to be, content day. Let's say I'm going to produce content, right? But then there's a fire that needs to be put out, or something that comes up. So how do you stay disciplined in there, or is there some flexibility that you allow for fires and that type of stuff?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I would start with, like a lot of things I do. I think about startups, or I think about sales as an ultra marathon, right? And you talked about training and the discipline on there. So when I look at, I just did a race in June, at the end of June, called the Western States 100. That's a pretty big race for me personally. It's really hard to get into this race. It's one of the most prestigious races, ultra marathons in the world, and it was, could very well be like a once in a lifetime shot. So I told myself, like, look, I am going to give everything I can to this race and do absolutely as good as I can with my physical and age and other limitations. Like, I'm going to give everything I can to this, which meant working with a coach, which meant, working out 6 days a week. Some of those days I counted 45 days, starting from March 1st through middle of June, where I did 2 workouts a day. So I was just like, I gave my everything to this. And, but if you're doing 9, 10 workouts a week, you don't feel like doing workouts 9 or 10 days a week. Like, when I look back, I'm like, there's about a third of the workouts or training runs where I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of excited about this. I get to go out on this trail, or even some weight days on Sunday mornings where I'm doing deadlifts. I kind of like lifting the weight and feeling the bar. I'm like kind of excited. So it's about a third of those workouts. There's a third of the workouts where I'm kind of like, like today was kind of like, all right, I'm not like super thrilled, but I got this hour. It's going to make me feel better. I need to do it anyway. So let me just go do it. And then a third of the workouts, I look at them and I'm just like, oh, this is going to suck. I'm setting the alarm and I know it's going to go off at 4. The alarm goes off at 4. And I'm like, do I really want to get up and drive out to some hill on a Wednesday morning and run up and down a hill 3 times over 2 hours? Like, I just don't want to do it. And so I relate that to your question around scheduling, and even more broadly, when you think about sales, where there's some things you need to do, right? And if you don't block out the time, it's going to get pushed. And that fire that could be 10 minutes turns into a 2-hour quagmire. And for me, like on Monday when I'm doing content, if it could be as simple as like, well, I'll just check out to see what's happening on Slack. And then I go into Slack and I see that there's some situation that I got to deal with. Then my entire brain goes from, happy, excited, build content mindset to like lizard brain, where you're just like, I got to put out the fire. And it's really hard to switch back into that mode, into that zone. So that's why I just say, look, if it's that big of a deal, then somebody else on the team is going to let me know about it. I don't have to go find it on my own. And so we communicate to the team like, hey, Mondays are do not bother Scott day, because you do your stuff, he's going to do his stuff. I have to do the content in order to drive the business. I have to do the content in order to help clients. Not scheduling things over top of other things, or even like this podcast, we have 30-minute buffer before, 30-minute buffer after, because I want those 30 minutes to be able to focus and get ready. I want to have 30 minutes after to wind down. I don't want to have to jump off from this to a call with a client, because it's not fair to the client if I'm not there ready to be present. So you just like, once you set up the rules, however hard it is, you stick to them. And eventually then you sort of get in this habit where breaking the rules feels worse, a lot worse than sticking to the rules. Because the pain of me missing that workout psychologically is much bigger than me getting my butt out of bed, making coffee, and driving out to the hills on a Wednesday morning. I know it's going to suck, but once I get going, it's going to be fine. And when I get back home at 7:30 to make my son breakfast, I'm going to be so happy that I did it, because the rest of the day, I'm going to know I've got that done. So I kind of think of it in that way, psychologically, as much as the physical side.
I love hearing that because it'll just reinforce my initial hypothesis about why it's important to stick to whatever structure you have.
And even intraday, it doesn't even have to be like a whole day of content, like even, initially this started off as like my mornings are kind of my best time. So same thing, I wake up, feel refreshed, I can get to writing. It's when I'm most creative. I can get up, go to the coffee shop early, come back if I want to. And so even if I say, look, from 6 to 8, I'm going to do my creative work. And then after 8 o'clock, my creative time is over. And then I'm going to get into operations stuff or coaching stuff or marketing and sales stuff. Then at least I've made that time, because you're not going to find the time to do stuff. You got to make the time to do it. Just like these races, or just like, finding time to raise chickens or goats or horses or kids, right? I mean, it's never going to be a perfect time to have kids. You just decide like, I want to have kids, and then you make time for kids. You make time for horses. You make time to do your prospecting, if that's what it means, or you make time to do the proper recruiting and interviewing process. You don't skip steps because you know long-term, if you skip the steps, it's going to be much more painful to have to replace the bad hire at your VP of sales than it would have been to take the extra day to get really ready for that interview to vet out those candidates that people like you put in front of them.
That's right. That's right. Okay, fantastic. Tell me more about Sales Qualia and who your ideal customers are, who you're helping.
Well, it's interesting. We kind of have, I'll give you a little backstage view of who our ideal customer is, and then we can talk about the front stage view. Or maybe we'll talk about the front stage view, and then we'll talk about the backstage view.
Okay.
So the front stage view, meaning like, the way we think about and the way our clients look at us, we specifically work with early stage, growth stage, B2B enterprise startups. So when in our world, when we say early stage, growth stage, that's usually a B2B startup that's seed funded or A round funded. So in that part of their journey, their ultra marathon. So we don't work with, entrepreneurs that, hey, I got this great idea, I want to like mock up and see if I can, build a product. That's too early for us. We usually work really well with teams that have been out there. They have a product that works. They've got some customers, they've got some revenue, but what's missing is that sense of like, how do I get from those first 10 enterprise customers and a couple $100,000 in revenue to like break through that $1 million barrier? Or teams that are at $1 million, how do I get from 1 to 3 and 3 to 10 million? How do I start scaling this operation? Those are the areas of a journey for a startup that usually, most startups will either, stall out or die out. It's not bad product or bad addressable market or anything else. It's just a matter of the founders being typically tech focused, right? They're either engineers or product people, sometimes financial people. They've built this great product. They got those first customers through network or advisors or just early adopters that happen to find them. And they're like, oh, okay, I got this customer. But when it comes to getting more repeatable, predictable, scalable sales, like how do I get a lead generation engine going? Like how do I get a certain way of like running my product demos every way? How do I run customer discovery calls? How do I handle technical objections? Those are the things that go into hardcore sales training and building sales systems that most founders struggle with. So that's why that range is really kind of where we find is our best fit, because that's what we do really well. We help those teams identify the strategy systems and build the skills they need to get out of that startup phase and into ramp up and scale up.
And I'm assuming then part of those skills, and we'll get into this later, but we can come back to it, but are part of those skills helping them identify whom they should be hiring to get to that level? Because in other words, if they're tech founders and their relationship selling at that point, they're not necessarily traditional process-driven salespeople. So how does that work?
Yeah, great question. So when we think about hiring, we feel like our job is to show founders, when we think of the who, it's not the person, the exact person. Hey, I know this person over at XYZ company. I think that person would be a great VP of sales. We don't do what you do because what you do in itself is hard enough. It's not something we can just like latch on to all the other coaching. Like, oh yeah, by the way, we do recruiting and that's really easy. It's not, It's really hard.
Right.
When we think about who, we think about like, what are the roles that you need to hire for? So it could be like, hey, as an early stage founder, you've got your early customers. You yourself, you want to get that first kind of outbound engine working. You work with us. We'll get that outbound sequence working. We'll help you set up your system. We'll help you start generating leads through good messaging and booking those meetings. Once you kind of get that working, then we'd say, hey, the who you need to hire now is a couple of SDRs to start running that process for you, right? And then we do have a hiring system where we help them think about how do you define your role, because you don't want to just go to LinkedIn and go copy and paste other SDR roles. It needs to be specific to your company. It needs to be specific to the roles and responsibilities that person's going to be needing. Later on, it might be like, hey, now I've built some systems. I've got some SDRs. I've hired, some other who's might be, now it's time to hire some AEs, or now it's time to hire a customer success manager. You maybe have that first like small sales go to market customer facing team, couple SDRs, couple AEs, a CS person. Now it's time, you got your Series A, it's time to hire a VP of sales. And we help them identify when and who, like, oh, the who now is you need a VP of sales or a head of sales, even before a VP of sales. And these are the things you need to be looking for. And this is when you should be hiring this person. And then from there, they might work with someone like you who can help them find that head of sales or VP of sales. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Let me just dig a little bit deeper there. What are some of the leading indicators that tell you the who? In other words, you
Yeah.
alluded to, okay, now is the time to hire the SDRs. Now is the time to hire head of sales as opposed to the VP of sales. Like, what are some of the indicators or data that you're looking at to say this is when you should do this and this is why you should do this?
A lot of it is just based on, like, when we think of it, you mentioned I have a master's degree in economics. So if you think about it from an economic standpoint, it's really about opportunity cost. So if I'm a founder, yes, like as a founder, I need to build the first version of my own sales process. I need to get some of that outbound working, even if it's not like the elegant 25 touch sequence that's on Outreach or Sales Loft or something like that. I still need to get like the messaging right. I got to figure out like, who am I targeting at these companies that I'm selling to? Who are the different buyers that need to be contacted and involved with the product demo? Those are the kinds of things that a founder needs to kind of put together, that first structure. And then once they go, okay, like I got this outbound sequence, it's working pretty well. Like I'm sending out this, couple emails and a LinkedIn message and doing a call. I'm able to book meetings at a relatively predictable rate. I've got a 40% open rate and a 20% reply rate and a 10% booking rate. Like I kind of have some basic metrics. That's a signal where you're like, okay, I could keep doing this and be my own SDR, but man, it's almost like a full-time job for me to keep doing this. And now once I get the meetings booked, like I got to actually like run the demos and the meetings. And so if I'm spending all my time booking meetings, but not spending time preparing for those meetings or making sure that those meetings convert to the next stage of the sale, my opportunity cost then is really, really high, because the cost of messing up that one booked meeting with the Fortune 500 you've been targeting, that preparation might take you 4 or 5 hours to get ready, to do the discovery calls, to get ready for the demo, to make sure you're really, equipped to have run that all-star product demo. Well, it might take you 6 hours just to book that one meeting of 6 hours of SDR work. So that's a case where you go, okay, I got a basic process in place. Now it's time for me to hire an SDR, because now I can also manage that person. I don't have to hire an SDR and say, well, I don't know how to get leads, but you just like go figure it out. Like that's a recipe for disaster. If instead I can say, look, I've been running the sequence. This is the messaging we use. These are the people we target. And when I run the sequence, these are the basic metrics by which you should be hitting. Now that person doesn't have to do any of the crafting or the messaging. They just follow the recipe that you've built. And now you can manage that person. If they're not hitting those metrics, then you can say, hey, you're not hitting these metrics. We need to course correct. Or if they are hitting those metrics, then you can reward them appropriately. So that's how we sort of teach founders, like, do it yourself first. And then as soon as you start to see some basic metrics and repeatability, as quickly as possible, then you want to move that to somebody else so you can focus on the higher value activity.
I love it. You mentioned, I know that you have on your blog or your podcast, certainly on your website, lessons from the trail. And I picked out the 3 that interested me the most that I want to talk to you about in terms of, lessons that you learned from the trail, but also apply to founders, which are first, putting yourself first, second, incrementalism, and then third, focus on your locus. So let's start with putting yourself first. Tell me a little bit about that and how those are parallel.
I mean, it's related a little bit to this idea of like schedule everything we talked about a little while ago. Like, look, let's face it, you're running a company, whether you're a 3-person company, a 30-person company, a 300-person company, right? You're leading this team. People are looking to you to lead them. And aside from that, like a lot of people have families or partners or kids or all of those things. And I feel like if you don't take care of yourself, your physical health, your psychological health, your mental health. I mean, we've seen all kinds of examples with the Olympics recently, athletes not, feeling vulnerable enough to put their mental health first. Fortunately, this is coming out and people are realizing like, no, I need to take care of myself first before I worry about the team, before I worry about the gold medal, before I worry about what my coach wants me to do. So this idea of putting yourself first is saying like, look, I got to like take care of myself, whether that's just like, look, I'm going to block out 3 days a week for an hour and I'm going to go for a 3-hour walk. Like that's my exercise. Or it could be something like, hey, I've always wanted to run a 10K. It's like, okay, cool. Like we're recording this podcast in August. You know what? Check the calendar. Maybe there's a turkey trot 4 months away. It's not like you don't have to worry about, super long training, but it's like, I'm going to put myself first. This is something I want to accomplish. So I'm going to make time to do that. Or maybe it's the vacation that you keep putting off. with your family. It's like, you know what, I'm going to make sure that my team knows I'm putting myself and my family first. We need to take this break. I deserve this time with my wife or my husband or my kids. So it's just about like every day making sure that you're taking care of yourself, because if you don't take care of yourself, then you're not going to be able to take care of other people. It's another reason why I wake up so early in the morning. I don't always get up and train at 4 a.m. Sometimes I just get up, get coffee. And one of my morning rituals is to do what's called morning pages. So I learned this from Julia Cameron. And it's just this idea, like you wake up and you handwrite, journal a couple pages of like what's on your mind. And it's a way for me to like get a sense for like, what am I anxious about? What am I excited about? What am I worried about? What am I afraid of? How am I thinking about this decision? And what that does is allow me to get settled and get a sense for, okay, this is how I am today. This is what I need to do. Maybe like right now I'm feeling a little impatient with something that's going on with work or something that's going on with my spouse. I'm like, okay, what can I do to make that better? So it's just about centering myself so I can be a better person all around. So that's
I would imagine that
putting yourself first.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No.
I would imagine that helps with creativity as well, right? In terms of problem solving, brain dumping, I guess, if you will, in the morning, and sort of getting all that out there, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times when you get stuff, out of your brain and on the paper, it's not nearly as scary as you thought it was, or you're just like, God, I'm like so frustrated with this person and they're doing this and they're doing that. And why am I feeling frustrating? Well, these things happen. Okay, why did those things happen? And you start like backtracking and just writing it down. You realize like, oh, you know what? It's actually my fault. I didn't do a good job training that person in the first place. I wasn't clear with my instructions. And so a lot of times, like you said, it's just like getting it out and you're realizing it's not all that bad, or it's stuff that is in my control and I can fix it. And it's my responsibility to do it.
Talk to me about incrementalism.
Incrementalism is this lesson from the trail. Startups or ultra marathons. I talk about this race I just did, or any of the races. Like I didn't wake up one day and go, "Hey, tomorrow I'm going to do a 100-mile race." I mean, this started 15 years ago when I decided. You know what? When I was much younger, in my early 20s, I'd done a couple of triathlons. I did a marathon when I was like 23. Excuse me, 23, and then I just kind of like got away from that stuff. And then once I got married, I was kind of like, all right, like I'm not single anymore. I'm not going to do poker nights with the boys anymore. Like it's Saturday. What am I going to do? I'm not going to sit around watching college football all day anymore. So I got to like find stuff to do. So I'm like, hey, I remember I used to do these races and they were kind of a lot of fun. And I had this old steel frame bike in the closet. I dusted it off, started running a little bit, started swimming at the pool in our apartment complex. And so it's kind of like, okay, I can kind of get back into this. And over time, over those 15 years is where I'm now able to do a 100-mile race or a 200-mile race or swim the Catalina Channel. So on a broad scale, it starts with like taking those small steps, but then on a micro scale, especially when you think about running a business or thinking about the things that are ahead of you every day, let's use that outbound sequence. If you're, thinking about like, I know I should be doing outbound, but it just feels overwhelming. I don't have a 25 touch sequence. I don't have the right systems. I don't know what to do. Well, nobody does when they start. But what you can do is say, look, I don't need to have a 25 touch sequence. What if I just came up with like 3 emails and sent a LinkedIn message to the people that I know I want to target? Congratulations, you just started an outbound campaign. And then you can start building on top of that. So I think it's just really important for people to remember that there are no like big jumps. Every big jump that you've ever seen is just a series of really, really small steps. So that's what I meant incrementalism. You make this incremental improvements, incremental advances, incremental learnings, and that over time is what gets you to the place where you get to do remarkable things.
I'd imagine that taking that incremental approach and thought process also builds confidence as well, right? Because you're setting those short-term incremental goals, and then as you're achieving those, you feel good, you feel better, like, oh, okay, I did this 3 email sequence, right? It's
yeah, man, that's a good way to think about it too. The confidence thing is really good because like this past race that I finished in June, I really started training back on January 4th, I think was the date. And like I've been doing this stuff, so I have like a pretty strong foundation, but I'm not ready on January 4th to go out and run this 100-mile race. So as part of that 5-month, 6-month run up to it, there are certain checkpoints kind of along the way. Like, hey, by the end of January, I want to be at this place. By the end of February, I want to be at this place. By the end of March, I'm going to be here. And then by April, to your point about confidence, like one of the things that a couple of my friends that were also doing this race, we said, hey, we want to do this one run. It starts at a place called Forest Hill, goes out to another place called Last Chance and back. And so it's a 37-mile run with about 10,000 feet of elevation climbing. And like, that's a great example where we're able to do that in May because we've been training for the last 3 or 4 months, and then going and having that on the calendar and saying like, hey, I'm going to get to that place, and then going and doing that and coming home that day and having a really great day on the trail and feeling good. I'm like, wow, like the training is working. Like I feel good. I just ran 37 miles in the mountains, and I'm like, I feel like I could do a lot more, because that's good. I'm going to have to do a lot more come race day. So you're right. It's like that built a lot of confidence in me to know like I'm going to be ready for this race at the end of June.
What's focus on your locus? Tell me about that.
That's just about, there's so many things that are outside of your control. There's this really great quote from Vinod Khosla from Khosla Ventures. I heard him say this probably 10 years ago at a conference called FailCon, and he's retweeted it a couple of different shapes and forms of the tweet. But it's something to the effect that, like, as a startup, you have, like, let's say there's 10 variables that will affect your success. He says 5 of them are up to you. It's like 5 of those variables are things you can do. 2 of those things are what your competitors will do, and 3 of those things are just pure luck. Like, things need to break your way.
Yeah, right.
And I think you just, like, going into this, we all know there's some risk of failure. In fact, the risk of failure is pretty high, especially in the startup world. And so, like, you can't worry about stuff that's out of your control, even if it's pandemic or economic shutdowns or anything else that's out of your control. The only thing you can do is say, okay, well, this is what's impacting us. How can I take that and move to something, take some action that helps me counteract that, as opposed to, gosh, like, once the pandemic goes over, like, things are going to be back to normal and sales will pick up again, or geez, like, man, in our industry, all these rules, these new rules and compliance and regulations, and like, it's just killing our business right now. Like, I wish the lawmakers in Washington would just, like, sort this out, make it easy for our life. It's like, well, like, what are you going to do? Like, go to DC and get a bunch of politicians to make decisions for you? Of course not. So you just have to look at that and say, well, this is the situation that I'm in. What can I do with where I'm at? And just focus on whatever's in your locus of control. And that's related to when you're out there on the trail, like, you're doing these races. There's so many things that can go wrong, that are out of your control. Like this last race I did, it was 100 degrees that day. So you're running 100 degrees in these canyons. Like, I can't control the weather. I can check the weather and go, wow, that really sucks. It's going to be the hottest day on this race since 2009. Like, that sucks. Like, I was really hoping it was going to be 84 degrees, because that would make the day a lot easier. So I can either whine and moan and complain about it, or I can go, okay, it's going to be 100 degrees. What can I do to make sure that I'm going to be ready for that kind of day? What can I do with my nutrition? How can I make sure I'm getting enough hydration and salt? What can I do with my pace? How can I change things around with my race strategy that maybe it turns into an advantage for me relative to the rest of the runners, or making sure that I'm doing enough in my training so that when that day comes, it doesn't matter if it's 100 degrees or 84 days, I'm still going to have 84 degrees. I'm still going to have a great race.
I love that. Control the controllables. Yep.
Focus on your locus.
Let me go back to 2013, if you will. You were the VP of Advisory Services at CoreLogic. And somehow you heard of a little known startup called Blend.
Yeah.
First, how did you hear about them? And tell me why you decided to join them when you did.
Yeah. So the backstory on that is the founders at Blend were from Palantir. So Nima Gamsari, Eugene Mariali, another guy named Roscoe Hill were 3 of the original founders at Blend. So when I was at Altos Research, which is where I worked before CoreLogic, Palantir was our customer. So they bought our real estate data because Palantir was fixing all of the mortgage portfolio problems at places like Chase, Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, and those guys that I just mentioned were part of that early team in Palantir. So they were inside of the mortgage industry, sorting out all of this crash that happened in 2008, 9, 10, 11. They were using our data at Altos as part of the way to fix those problems. So they were actually customers of mine, and I came to know them. And I knew they were obviously really smart guys. So after about 5 years or so at Altos, I kind of felt like that had run its course, and I'd kind of been in startups for about 7 years, 7, 8, 9 years. And I was kind of like feeling burned out. So another customer of ours was CoreLogic, and I got to know one of the executives there really well. And I said, look, I'm thinking about making a change. You know, what do you think? And they said, well, funny you should mention, because we've got this spot and we're looking for somebody, would you be perfect? So that I kind of slid into that role as a way to kind of take a sabbatical from the startup world. And after I was there for about 2 or 3 months, I'm like, great people, but I freaking hate working at big companies. Like, I got to get out of here. Like, it seemed great to have this big base salary and big bonus checks and all that stuff, not have to do all the crazy startup stuff, but it just was not my jam. So now I'm like, okay, now what do I do? And because I'd been on the side while I was at Altos and CoreLogic, I'd been doing some coaching at startups. I'd written a couple books and done some workshops. So I kind of had this little side gig that I called Sales Qualia. A couple of like side coaching clients here and there. So it's just more like a project than anything. And so my wife and I were talking about it. I'm like, well, I mean, I could go turn this into a business and kind of pick up some consulting clients. So that was my original exit from CoreLogic. And I happened to see an update on LinkedIn from Nima about Blend. And I was like, oh man, I remember Nima is such a good guy. So I sent him a quick note. Hey man, congratulations on the new business. Hope it turns out well. And he just almost immediately replied back. He's like, yeah, great to hear from you. You know, we should meet up for coffee. So we met for coffee. They actually originally became a consulting client of mine. And after about 6 weeks, we landed a contract at Freddie Mac. And they're like, hey, what do you think about just like being the head of sales here instead of doing consulting work? And I said, sounds good to me. And that's how I ended up there as employee number 13 at Blend.
Employee number 13, and you were the first sales hire ultimately.
Yeah,
right?
I was the first non-founder. Yeah, I was basically at that point, they had been at it, like building this core platform for about a year and a half. They said, we think we have a product. We know we want to work in the mortgage financial market. You've been selling in this market for a while. You obviously know a lot of people and you understand startups. So you know that there's going to be a lot of ambiguity here. So my job was really to go out there and start identifying what I call now problem product fit. Like before you have product market fit, you got a product problem fit. You got to figure out if your product solves a problem for people. And so that's what we did with Freddie Mac and a couple of other early customers. And that kind of got us on our way. And from there, I built out the first kind of round of those systems that we talked about before around lead gen and running demos and all the system that it takes to convert customers. Ran a few of the big implementations that we had with our first early customers, built the first early go-to-market customer success team, and was there for the first couple of years all the way up through the Series C round.
Tell me about that process, I guess, if you will, that playbook in terms of coming in and, you know, you've got product problem fit there. You figured that out, and then you start putting in other processes and systems. What are some of the first, is there a playbook, if you will, in terms of like, okay, this is what needs to happen first, this is what needs to happen second, or is there sets of data and information that you need to you know, to understand and analyze before making those decisions? Just tell me a little bit about what that actually looks like.
Yeah, man. You're asking some good questions. I'll get a chance to answer some of this stuff. So the first thing for us was at least having a hypothetical target market. So, you know, mortgage lending in particular, it's obviously like $1 trillion industry. And there's also 8,000 plus lenders in the United States. So you could look at that and go like, wow, we can sell to 8,000 lenders. But we also know like that's a recipe for disaster, because if I try to sell the same lending software to Golden One Credit Union down the street as I'm trying to sell to Wells Fargo, it's just the version of their problem when it comes to lending and customer engagement is just like different altogether. You can't sell to both. So for us, we made that decision early. We said, look, the mission of the company is to completely reinvent the way consumers are getting their mortgage loans. And the only way that we're going to be able to do that with any real impact is if we will only work with the top 100 lenders, because in lending, there's, you know, not just the 80-20 rule, but it's like the 90-10 rule. Like 90% of the loans are done by 10% of the lenders. It's like Wells Fargo and Chase and Quicken and Prime Lending and all these huge companies. So yeah, we could spend lots of years getting a bunch of Golden One credit unions, which is be fine. Maybe you could build a business doing that, but they're only doing a couple hundred loans per quarter versus Wells Fargo, which is doing like 100 loans an hour. So we just decided, first thing we're going to do, we're going to go after the big guys. We're only going to focus on the top 100. And so that was the first thing. The second thing was then getting, in some ways, brave enough to talk to the top of the organization. So sometimes we would get a lead. I remember distinctly getting this one inbound lead from an assistant vice president at a regional bank, which is pretty low on the totem pole when it comes to making decisions. It's just not somebody who makes, can really make the kind of decisions that we need to make. And this person, is the typical like, hey, we're checking out what you do, and I'm on the tech committee, and this sounds great. Can you send me a one pager? And I'm like, oh my God, this is going nowhere, right? Nowhere fast. It's just like a vampire, and he doesn't even know it. He's going to suck the life out of me. And so the second thing we had to do is say, like, when those kind of things come in, we're just not going to talk to those people. We're going to go for the C-level. We're going to talk to the customer, the chief customer officer. We're going to talk to the chief lending officer. We're going to talk to the head of operations, because those are the people that are going to make the kinds of decisions around their lending structure that we need to talk to. Those are the people who are going to make these huge infrastructure decisions. So that was part two. And then the third part I would say is then, as we started getting some of those early customers, we're looking at, how do we make it easy for them to get started with us? So things like proof of concepts and paid pilot programs, so that we could reduce the risk for them and show them the value creation, what the potential was. So that was really kind of like the top three things: is target market, who are your buyers, and what are you going to do to help them get started so they can at least test it out in a paid way, because that when people pay, they pay attention. It's not like a bunch of free trials, so that there's real engagement. And then that way we knew we could get some land and expand going from there.
So is that a philosophical decision that you've made over the years and that you advise your clients to do, which is no freemium, no product-led growth? They're paying for access from day one?
Typically, the clients we work with, we tell them that. I mean, I think there's a place for that. If you're, if you're selling, say, like a $79 CRM or $70 a month CRM or some other like tool, or maybe it's a Slack plugin that's $20 per user per month kind of thing. I think there's ways to do freemium or, like you said, product-led growth. When you're selling, most of our clients are selling to the enterprise. It's, it's a product that's 10K a year or up to, we have some clients that are selling $1 million implementations. So, budget usually really isn't the issue. It's whether or not the company you're selling to believes that you can add value to them. Price is only an issue in the absence of value. And so part of that sales process is making sure that you don't waste a bunch of time with people who just want to check out the new tech. You got to spend time with people who are serious about making fundamental decisions of their organizations. Hans Morris, he's at NICA Partners. He was one of the early investors at Blend, and I used to meet with him every quarter because he used to be the chief credit officer at Visa. And so he used to work with us in terms of helping with introductions and things like that. And one of the things he told me is, he said, there are no shortage of interesting conversations. And as soon as he said that, I was like, holy crap. I know exactly what you're saying, right? It's that AVP from the regional bank. It's the people who clicked on the LinkedIn ad. It's the people who download the free trial or whatever. They want to see the demo 4 times, and then they want you to send a one pager after seeing the demo for 4 times. They all want to see the stuff because they want to see what's new, because they hate their old stuff. But our job as sellers is to identify who has the problem, who has made this problem a priority, who are the decision makers that can actually move this thing forward. So when he said there's no shortage of interesting conversations, we've translated that into a series of systems to make sure that our clients know you can only focus on the people that are really interested in taking action, not just interested in seeing the cool new tech.
You mentioned 10K as a bar, I guess, if you will, in terms of price point. Is that a bar? In other words, did I hear that correctly? In other words, if a customer has 5K, frankly, as a price point,
yeah,
go ahead, talk to me about that.
Yeah, I kind of think of it as I think that's what that I would call $10,000 is kind of like the minimum. That's your threshold for what becomes more of an enterprise sale. That's roughly $1,000 a month.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Anything under that, you can usually sell to a local operations manager or a director level person, and they could probably even throw it on their corporate credit card.
Mm-hmm.
Or they've got some kind of like discretionary budget that it can be a local decision and it can be pretty fast moving.
Mm-hmm.
Once you start getting over 1,000, Then it starts to become like, well, it's like me and the team, and we'll have to maybe do a demo and a couple follow-ups. There becomes like the rudiments of a real sales process here, not just, get lead, do demo, get conversion.
Mm-hmm.
It and even up until like 30K a year, or roughly $3,000 a month, like that, 10 to 30 window is where I know a lot of enterprise startups are pricing their product, at least initially.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you're going to have several layers of decision makers. You're going to have to get the IT people involved somehow because they have to give you approval, or you might have to get the risk person involved, or the procurement team involved, because they want to make sure that you are ISO certified, and you've done all of your penetration testing and all the stuff that goes into implementing true enterprise software. So that's why we use 10K as sort of a minimum barrier. But in most cases, it might be a little bit higher.
Got it. That makes sense. Tell me about any roadblocks there, the hypothesis that you had that turned out to be inaccurate, that you needed to pivot or make a different strategic decision about. Was there anything like that?
Yeah. We did not have to make a pivot. However, this is something that I think is really critical at the earliest stage for a lot of companies that are just beginning their go-to-market strategy. And there's a model that I would sketch out if we were doing a training or something. But if you think about those first early customers, we talked about getting problem product fit or product problem fit. Like before you get product market fit, you got to figure out, does your product solve the problem for somebody? Like, do they have a problem, and are they willing to give you money for the thing that you made? It's like, like fill the gap, basic stuff. And I found this both at the startups that I have, where I've been head of sales at 3 different places, as well as we've seen this with our own clients. Typically, those first couple of customers, it's interesting because the first couple customers you have, you'll be so excited that somebody's buying your stuff, and you'll do amazing things with them. But as you start to go further into your go-to-market and you start selling to more customers, what's going to happen is those first couple of customers, you might have kind of a wide range or some big variation. So at Blend, we had Freddie Mac as a customer that was paying us $400,000 a year. We also had a very local lender who was in the Bay Area, was willing to work with us on workflows and stuff to help us kind of figure out what that needed to look like from their standpoint as a lender. And they paid us $100 to get started. So we had like Freddie Mac and then this local lender. Then the third customer we have is a company called NationStar. And NationStar actually used our platform not for mortgage origination lending, but actually for mortgage servicing. So they had delinquent loans, and they needed a workflow for their agents to be able to track which loans were getting action taken by the borrower, which ones were not. So our first 3 customers actually did not fall into that top 100 lender category, because we were just trying to figure out like who's in the market, who wants to buy the thing, what kind of problems do we solve. It was then after that third customer that our fourth customer was actually on a mortgage origination company. And so I say that because once you have those first early customers, you're going to be excited and happy, and you're so glad to have them. But there's going to be a point in your life where you're probably going to go like, crap, we have these legacy customers. Like, they're kind of like taking a lot of time, or they're not, like this dude over here is like a mortgage servicing company, and we actually want to work with lenders. So this one's a mortgage investor, not a lender. And there's going to come a time where you have to figure out like, how do you offboard those clients, because they're actually drag on your ability, because now you've started to define your product market fit through that product problem fit process.
So how do you do this? Did you have to make those decisions? In other words, did you need to offboard them? Or
so a couple things happened in this case. In one case, Freddie Mac found a different solution that was probably better for them in the long run. So they said like, hey, we're not going to renew this contract. We worked with them for about a year and a half. So it was great for us because we had a great logo and we had some cash coming in to prove like, hey, we built a thing that people want to buy. So when we're all of our next meetings, we're like, oh yeah, Freddie Mac's a customer. They're like, oh, okay, now I'm listening. Right. So they kind of offboarded themselves. The small lender just couldn't not get into a workflow. So we basically said, look, this isn't a good fit. And they agreed. And they're like, you know what, that's fine. Thanks for giving it a try. We're still friends, and we're going to go our separate ways. There's probably a different solution that you're going to need. And then the third customer actually had a lending operation. So we started to transition over and, okay, how could we work with you instead of just focusing on the servicing operation? How can we work with you on the origination side? So I think it's just a matter of having some emotional maturity around the business goals that you have and that your customers have. And if you actually go to them and say, listen, I know what your priorities are. I see this is where you want to take your company over the next year or 3 years or 5 years. That's your roadmap. This is our roadmap. It goes in a totally different direction. So we don't think we're going to be the best long-term solution for you. And so you don't just like cut them off that day. You say, why don't we come up with a roadmap together where we can continue to support you over the next 6 months or 12 months to make sure you get what you need. And that gives you time to go look for another provider, another solution provider. And maybe we can even help you find those people. So it's good all around because you're keeping the relationship and you're keeping the cash flow because you're keeping them for another 6 or 12 months. And I think ultimately that customer that you're offboarding will really appreciate the fact that you're being honest with them about who you are going to be in the future versus the direction they want to go.
Yeah, right. Yep. Because if you have a net promoter score, you want to make sure that is strong, of course. And
yeah,
by not delivering because they're taking up too many resources, so you don't have enough resources to support them, then obviously that can hurt. So
yep.
Okay, very interesting. This is another example of my curiosity getting the best of me. We're almost at the hour, and I have so many more questions that I need to ask. Can I ask? Can we add in that? Are you okay with? We go
yeah, I'm good.
5 minutes.
I have a 30-minute buffer. So.
Okay, I know. I heard that. I'm like, how much of that buffer do I want to take?
Take as much as you want, man.
Take advantage of. I need his downtime before his next meeting. Okay, so just one other question, and then we're going to get into what I call the rapid fire 5 questions. Okay. So the last question I have before the rapid fire 5 questions, and we'll give people a way to reach out to you as well, of course, but is some of the biggest hiring mistakes that B2B founders make as they're trying to ramp up. And I don't know if maybe you can talk a little bit about Blend and some of the stuff that you learned there, or any context that you want to make it to help us crystallize it.
Yeah. So I think broadly, and it's weird because it sounds a little bit like a paradox, but they're related. So mistakes that I see founders make when it relates to hiring is either that they wait too long to hire, or they don't hire fast enough. You're like, well, how could it be both? Well, so when I say they wait too long to hire someone, going back to the early part of our conversation, thinking about, say, that outbound sequence, or on the other side, right? It could be around customer success, right? Now you got this customer and you're supporting that customer. Maybe as the founder, you're still doing the support tickets or you're still handling the emails. Like pretty quickly, you're going to start to see, okay, like these customers have these kinds of questions. That's where you need to, like, as quickly as possible, you need to find other people to take over those jobs. For a couple of reasons. One is your opportunity cost as a founder, very selfishly, right? You want to like optimize for your time and make sure you're spending time where you can really leverage, get the business to the next level. But even more importantly, the sooner you get specialists into different roles, those specialists are going to take over those roles and own those jobs. And if you hire the right people, they're going to quickly learn more about that job than you know yourself. Like I just had this conversation with our head of ops this morning about our live events person. Her name is Ruby, and she's fantastic. And I said, it's funny because we put her into this role about 10 months ago. And at the time it was like, okay, Ruby, this is how we do live events. And this is our structure. This is our system. This is our playbook. And over the last 3 months, I told Amy, our head of ops, I'm like, she knows way more about our live events than I do. Like, I don't know half the stuff that she's doing or how to do it. And that's a good thing, because I don't need to know how to run the ops on a live event. My job is to be able to deliver at the live event for clients or for, in workshops or keynote speaking opportunities, right? So that's the other benefit by hiring sooner rather than later, is that you get people, if you find the right people, they'll take that job and just own it. So you just know you got people that are reliable to handle those parts of the business. Mm-hmm. So that's what I mean, that they wait too long to hire. When I say they hire too soon, and you've probably seen this yourself, where somebody will call you up and they're like, oh, I need a VP of sales. Why do you need a VP of sales? Well, the last 3 that I hired didn't work out. You're like, interesting. Why didn't they work out? Oftentimes when I work with startups, they'll hire a VP of sales or even a CRO, and they don't really even have that first version of a sales playbook in place. Or they're like, gosh, I gotta like drive sales. I gotta drive revenue. So I'm going to go hire this person because they've been in the industry and they have a Rolodex. I'm just going to like hire this magical person and they're going to show up with all these leads and they're going to convert the business in the next 3 months. It's like, no, man, like that's not the hire you need to be making right now. You're hiring too soon for those kinds of roles. You need to hire for other roles first, or wait until you as the founder have figured out that version 1.0 of your sales process, then find somebody to come in and manage and build on top of it. So that those are the two sides of that paradox I was just talking about.
Yeah, and once you explain it, it makes perfect sense. And I see it at scale too, a lot of times where I've had, well, I shouldn't say not recently, but certainly in years past, where you have companies that will, they'll be at scale, they're scaling and they're adding salespeople at a rapid pace. And sometimes they end up overhiring because, maybe the market that they hired the new team for doesn't necessarily convert the way that they wanted to, or maybe somehow the economics of it just don't work out. And now all of a sudden, the 20 salespeople that they hired last quarter have to be cut in half to sort of,
yeah, for sure. And so, and the last caveat to that in terms of like the mistakes they make when it relates to hiring is thinking they have to do what everyone else is doing. And you asked about my experience at Blend. So one of the things that we learned really early at Blend is these implementations we're doing at these customers, like these are big implementations and they take lots of focus and they take some level of understanding about the mortgage market. Like we weren't setting up some kind of like cold email outbound sequence to like batch and blast to like 800 lenders. So when we built our first go-to-market and customer facing team, we didn't even really think about like, oh, we got to hire SDRs, we got to hire, AEs. What we did is we said, look, we need people that I can sit in front of an executive at a lender and know like this person can fly to Dallas, have a conversation with an executive, and the executive can walk away from that conversation feeling confident that we're going to be able to come through for them. And also feeling like they may have even learned something. And so when we hired our first initial team, we hired people that had mortgage expertise. We hired somebody who was a consultant around compliance from Price Waterhouse. We hired 2 people that had bought and sold mortgage securities on the trading desk. One was at division of Bain Capital. The other one was at, what's that huge, the guy, Ray Dalio's company, Bridgewater. Is that it? Is it called Bridgewater?
Got me.
I think that's the name of it. Its name's escaped me. Anyway, so these guys, like these 2 people, they understood mortgages. They understood the mortgage security market. They understood the importance of data. So we hired a project manager as part of the sales team, because as we get past that initial kind of demo phase and we're talking through, okay, if we were going to implement with you guys, what does that look like? Lots of moving parts. So we needed a project manager to step in as part of the sale and basically run point on collaborating with all the different people and all the different tasks that would have to go into this implementation plan that we were going to roll out as part of our proposal and contract. So for us, it wasn't like, oh, well, we're at this stage, so we need to hire this person. It was like, what does our business need right now? And going and finding those people that are the best fit for you.
Yeah, you're hiring for skill, not title or role. You were hiring for the particular skill. Very interesting. Okay, cool. All right. Now, the part of the interview, which should be the easiest, simplest, which is called the Rapid Fire 5, where I ask you 5 questions, give me 5 answers, and then we will wrap it up. Okay. Cool. But we talked about this one, I guess, initially, which is, do you have a philosophy or general approach to prioritizing your time? And of course, you broke that all down for us quite nicely.
Yeah.
So we'll go to number 2 then. Tell me about a setback that you've had to overcome and how you overcame it.
Wow. There's lots of little ones and I guess some big ones. I would say, depends how personal you want to get.
Get as personal as you want.
So I don't know if I'd call it a setback as much as a learning. So I mentioned my wife and being married. We've been married 15 years and that's about as long as I've been doing these endurance races. One of the reasons I was looking to fill the gap was because after we were married about a year or so, I was like not acting like somebody who was married. It was like, oh, we're doing poker night at the boys, or hey, there's some bachelor party in Las Vegas. And there was a point where like we sat down and we talked like a talk. And it's like, here are your options, right? Like, this is what I want and this is what you want. Like, are we going to make this work or not? You know, we made it work. And so that's an example. I don't know if it's a setback as much as like a decision I had to make. And those are things that I could control. And so that was led me into doing all this endurance racing and everything else that's happened ever since that. So,
and so let me ask you that just as a follow up there, which is how you overcame it. Because how you overcame it is obviously you made a decision, but then it was, okay, this is these endurance races and some of these things that I know I'm going to find joy in, right, to fill the gap of, you know, the poker nights and all those other things. This is what I'm going to do going forward, right?
Yeah. Well, one, I mean, I think it's like any relationship, whether it's you and your team member, or you and a client, it just comes out of communication, first of all. And like, are we aligned? It's like if you're selling to a customer, like, okay, where do you want to go? What are your priorities? Am I on board with that? Can we get there together? Yes or no? And that's, you know, not to make it sound simplistic, but that's kind of what it is. It's like, let's just communicate about what we both want. It turns out we both want the same things. Okay, well, now we both want the same things. How do we get there? Well, that means like I stop doing poker nights and I find something else that's going to fill that time. And then it's like slowly like making those changes and becoming more disciplined and thinking about, okay, well, if it's Saturday afternoon and I'm not watching college football and hanging out on the couch, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to figure out something that makes me happy. Well, let me get that old steel frame bike out and go for a 15-mile ride in Oakland and have some fun with it. So that's like the incrementalism we talked about earlier. It's definitely like a lot of, I don't want to say trial and error, but it was like, you know, lots of small steps along the way, to the point where like I could never even fathom going back to that. Like when I think about like going to Las Vegas, it makes me want to vomit, you know, or like we had a friend of ours who had a party at his house the other day, and it was, you know, just, you know, an adult party. It was fine. It wasn't like people were going crazy or anything. But I was like, all right, honey, I don't call my wife honey. I didn't say that, but I was like, all right, here's the deal. We're going to this guy's house. What time are we going to get there? She's like, I don't know, we get there around 6:30. I'm like, okay. I don't want to be there past 9, you know? And she's like, okay, well, I'd like to stay a little later. Okay. Well, we got my son who's 9, like he's got to get home anyway at some point. How about we just take 2 cars? It's not that far away. So it's not like we're going to be like burning a bunch of gas. And that way I can go home at 9. You can stay later. I can get Benjamin home and everybody's happy. You know, and that's just like a point of like basic communication. Like, what do I want? What do you want? Because if I don't communicate that and we get there and it's like 8:45 and I'm like, I want to get home. I don't like being out late anymore. I want to get some sleep. Now all of a sudden it's like, yeah, we've all been there, you know, whether it's a spouse or partner or boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, or even just like a friend, you're just out at a party. One wants to go, one wants to stay. What happens, right? Now everybody's unhappy.
Right.
So I always go back to this idea of like communicating and like, okay, what do we both want? How do we both get there? That's what sales is. First of all, that's just like human relationships are based on that.
Expectation setting. Right. Exactly. You know?
Yeah.
Well, glad to hear there was no offboarding. Back at that point, you weren't offboarded.
Yeah, exactly.
Everything was
hey,
good.
Guess what? I found this other solution provider for you. I'll stick around for another 6 months. You know, I'll make sure that you get, you know, to the next solution provider.
That's right.
And I don't want to make it sound like it was that bad, but it was just like, okay, look, like, are we serious about this or not?
Right.
Because one of us was and one of us wasn't, me being the one that wasn't as serious about it as he should have been. And, you know, she was right. So I'm glad we had that and I'm glad we fixed it. And that's why we're sitting here with 6 chickens, a dog, 3 goats, a son, and 3 horses, not in that order. The son was first. We also have 2 cats.
2 cats. That's right. Good. So on that, I guess, even relating to what you just said, perhaps, how do you manage stress or prevent stress from overcoming you?
Make lists.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just like the morning pages are really helpful. Just getting stuff down, planning out my day. I take stuff away a lot. Something I'm particularly good at. Like if I look at my week And I'm like, wow, Thursday looks pretty busy. I might look for, if I have, 8 things on that day, I'll look for something I can take out myself. Like, okay, I got this one thing scheduled. Maybe I don't have to do the workout at 5 o'clock in the morning. Maybe I can just wait till the end of the day so that I have that extra time in the morning to get a little bit of extra work done. So I'm more prepared for the rest of the day. Okay, I can make that change. So that's one thing that helps me reduce stress. Okay, I got this one meeting set up. It's an internal meeting where I'm going to be meeting with Matt, and Matt and I are going to go through some stuff. Like, is that the most important thing we got to do today? Or like, if we push that off to tomorrow, to tomorrow or Monday, or Tuesday, is that a big deal? No, not a big deal. Okay. Hey, Jocelyn, will you let Matt know we're going to move that meeting to Friday and just find us a new time? Yep, no problem. So now just kind of like taking stuff away where I had 8 things, now I'm down to 6, and then I might look and go, okay, we got this one meeting is scheduled for an hour. Do we really need an hour? Like, hey, Jocelyn, why don't you email that person, let them know, I think we can knock this out in 30 minutes. So we're just going to go ahead and update the calendar invite. If for whatever reason we need to run longer, we can find a way to do that. But you know what, let's just do a 30-minute meeting here. So just by, incrementalism, slowly taking things away, now all of a sudden it's like, oh, now I got some white space back in my calendar here.
Yes.
That helps me reduce the stress that I'm feeling. And then finally, when I wake up that day and I look at my day ahead, even if it is a really tough day, maybe it's one of the days I can't take anything away. It's just like one of those days. I just look at that day and I go, you know what? It's 5 in the morning right now. In 12 hours, it's going to be 5 in the afternoon. The day is going to be done. And every person on my calendar deserves my best. And so I'm just going to look at each meeting one at a time. I'm going to be ready to go. I'm going to be present. I'm going to give that person my best and then move on to the next thing. And at 5 o'clock, I'm going to be done. And then I'm going to hit the garage and have dinner with my family and watch Mythbusters with my son.
And feel great about it, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. No regrets. I love it. What do you want to get better at right now?
I just wrote this down this morning, patience.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah.
Patience, okay.
I want to do better at being patient. And I think I am getting better. But because I'm disciplined and focused and structured and all those things, along with the good, there's also the downside, which is like my perception of the world to me is like the right one. And it's not. I just think it is. And so whether it's something goofy like, God, like this is not how you load the dishwasher.
Right.
Don't you know that the bowls go here and the dishes go there? And it's like, God, like, man, you're just blowing me up here. Or my son, like he is a lot like me and is a lot different than me in a lot of ways. And so nothing will test your patience more than a 9-year-old with a strong personality.
Yes.
And so when I look at, how I interact with him, and if he's telling me a story about something that happened at camp, or he's telling me, he can go on for hours about Minecraft and, not the most interesting topic for me and easy for me to go in my brain, like disappear and be like, like I want to, tell him I'm busy. I got to go do this other thing. So I'm trying to recognize those moments and go, you know what, to him right now, this is the most important thing in the world because he's doing this thing in Minecraft. He's been working hard at it for the last 6 months. So my job as a parent is I don't have to love the conversation, but I need to listen to him and make him feel like I'm there.
That's a great example.
So those are things I'm feeling like I'm getting better at recognizing, but it doesn't have to just be with family. It can be with clients. It can be with prospects. It can be in this conversation that we're having. It's just like, be present, be patient. Don't worry about it. If it was that important, it probably would have come up before.
Well, the good news is that we only got one last question, so you don't have to be too. I was actually going to ask you how patient you are with yourself as well. In other words, are you harder on yourself with patience, or are you harder on other people with?
That's an interesting question. I've never been asked that question, but as soon as you said it, I'm more patient with myself than I'm with other people.
Got it. Okay.
And I think that part of that is the training that I've gone through and knowing these things take a long time. Like I've recovered from knee surgery. I'm at a point where I couldn't even walk because I had a scope, or what do they call it? The arthroscopic surgery on I had a torn meniscus. I went from not being able to, from running to like being on crutches for a month and then having to do physical therapy. Last August, I was out training on a hill and twisted my ankle so badly. I like had a hobble back, and I was like out of commission when I was training for this thing I was doing. And like, I'm patient about those things. Like, I hurt my wrist. It's still taped up from the only race I did a month ago. And I'm like, I can't do pull-ups. All right, no big deal. Like, I'm totally patient about that stuff. Business. Like, okay, we wanted to be here by the end of this month. We're not there. No worries. What have we learned? Okay, we learned these things. We can do those things next month, blah, blah, blah. I'm cool with that. But yeah, somebody loads the dishwasher the wrong way. Oh my God, you're going to feel my wrath.
I love it. I love it. I'm the opposite. I'm like uber patient with people outside of me, and then inside I'm like screaming at myself, why did you do that? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, no, I'm
like,
much more nurturing to myself.
Yeah, no, I need to learn how to.
I mean, I'm hard on myself, but I'm not impatient on myself.
No, I'm impatient. What are you most excited about right now, personally and professionally? Last question.
Personally, the prospect of getting these horses, I think is going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be fun for my wife, especially. She's always wanted to have a horse, and it's just fun to be at a place in her life and have this privilege of being able to like do these things while there's so many other crazy things happening in the world. So I just look at, we talked about this last night, just in general, like in our life and where we are. And yeah, there's always more you can have and stuff like that. But I'm like, we have everything we could possibly ever need in this world right now. So I'm like, I even said, like, I'm totally content with everything right now. Like, we're good. And I'm so thankful for that every day. So I'm just excited that we get to do the kind of things that we do every day, whether it's, getting livestock or being able to run the next race that I'm doing in 2 weeks. So it's just, I feel very grateful for that. Just because I happened to be born in the United States to middle-class white people. And because of that, I had all of these opportunities in front of me that 99% of the people in the world will never even know exist.
An experience, yeah, for sure.
So that's what I'm excited about personally. Professionally, I'm excited about just a lot of stuff we're doing at work with the business. It's been exciting because we've just kind of been going through some funding season. So we've seen some clients get some rounds of funding over the last 6 months. So that's been like, oh my God, that's awesome. Because a lot of that is obviously work they've done. It's also work that we've helped them do with like, hey, we got this funding because we built these processes, and we could show that to our investors. Like, hey, when you give us money, this is how we're going to grow and scale, because we know how to get leads, and we know how to do conversions. We know how to do customer success, and our retention rate's really high. So when I see our customers winning, that just makes me feel like, yeah, it's not all us. I know that, just like my running coach isn't responsible for me doing these races, but he knows, like, he's like, hey man, like, we did it. Like, he knows there's a certain part of that he contributed to that success. And I feel the same way. And so I'm just excited when I see those things happen, and the growth that we've been seeing with the business and how we're running the business. I just took a month off from the business back middle June to mid-July, and being able to take that time away, spend time with family, do this race, and know that the clients got what they needed. And it wasn't the Scott show. It was about helping them get the results they needed to get. Like, those are all the things that make me feel really, really excited about where we are with the business.
I love that. I love hearing that. That's fantastic. How can people reach out to you to say thank you, engage your services?
Yeah, for sure.
For them to do that.
Yeah, and there's one quick thing I wanted to mention, because we talked about, like, you asked me earlier about what's our ideal client. I gave you the front stage view. This is the backstage view, and it's really quick. So when we look at people that come into our, what you call your, a sales funnel, people that want to work with us or learn about what we do, it's not just about, okay, are you a B2B seed stage company? What we look at is it's almost like some more of the human aspect. So working with a coach requires a certain person on the other side. Like, I can give you the best advice, or the team can give you the best strategy, but you've got to be willing to accept, okay, maybe I'm wrong about this and I should try this new thing. We call it the 100% rule. Like, we can only give 100% of our 50%. For our clients to be successful, they have to give 100% of their 50%. So that's why we call it the 100% rule. So when we're interviewing people or speaking to folks that might be interested in working with us, we're looking for kind of 5 things. Number 1, are they friendly and coachable? Number 2, are they willing to engage? I mean, like, we have a process that we follow, just like every business should have a process that they follow to identify who's a good fit and who's not. And if somebody's not willing to engage with our process, all right, that's cool. You don't have to. Like, this is the way we run things. So those are kind of two quick things. Are you friendly and coachable? Are you willing to engage and follow our process? Because we know our process works for us.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last three things is we work really well with people who know what they want. Like, hey, I want to build a repeatable sales process. We don't have to explain that to them. We don't have to sell them on the idea like, hey, you need repeatable sales. They're like, really? Are you sure? I don't know if I need that. Like, no, I need a repeatable sales process. And like, I know what I want. They know when they want it. So like, hey, I want to do this now because I got to get the first thing rolling by the end of the year so that 2022, we have a way of generating leads in a predictable way. So they know like it's a now thing. And they want our help as the fifth thing specifically. So that means they've gone to the website, they've read the books, they've, maybe not all of these things, maybe they've come to a webinar or a training I've done. And they kind of have like, oh, okay, I get how these guys at Sales Quality do this. That makes sense to me. So this is the kind of company I want to work with, not just like some random company or person or advisor, right? So it's, are you friendly and coachable? Are you willing to engage? Do you know what you want, when you want it, and you want our help? So as a preface to my sharing my contact information, I would just ask people to kind of like run themselves through that filter.
Absolutely.
So best way to get in touch with the company is just go to salesqualia.com, sales, QUALIA.com. If you've not been to the website before, you just go to the homepage, and right in the middle of the homepage, there's a huge button that says download book. And so I recently published a book called Stop Hustling, Start Scaling. This is the book that you mentioned is a best-selling book. It was a #1 new release on Amazon. And it's designed, it was a book that I wrote specifically for early stage founders to help them get started with building out that first version of their sales process. So that's like the best place to go, salesqualia.com, download a copy of the book. That'll give you a sense for how I approach things, how we approach things from a systems and framework standpoint. If you want to get in touch with me personally, just go to LinkedIn, search Scott Sambucci. I think I'm the only Scott Sambucci on LinkedIn. I'm on there constantly. It's like, I have a couple apps that are open all the time. LinkedIn is one of them. Like LinkedIn is open, Evernote's open. I keep those open more than I keep our own internal Slack open. So I would say that's a great place to reach out if you just want to shoot me a note or learn more about what we do. Happy to have a chat if it makes sense, or happy to speak to somebody on my team.
I just downloaded the book this morning, and
I
I
saw
can't
that.
wait. You saw it. There you go.
Yeah.
Can't wait to.
I didn't know your name was Jason Webb.
It is. It's funny when I pulled it up. For some reason, it populated that way. And I go, you know what? Let's just leave it.
Let's go, Jason.
So there you go. Scott Sambucci, the only one on LinkedIn. Thanks for going over quota.
Yeah, man, dude, it's been a hoot. Thank you so much for letting me share what I had to share with your audience. And if there's anything I can do to help you in your business, please let me know.
Awesome. Much appreciated. Thank you. Goodbye, everybody. I'm cueing the music.